The Milwaukee Bucks are again out of the postseason after another disappointing playoff run after having the best record in the NBA for the second year in a row. Despite having Giannis Antetokounmpo, who will likely be an MVP for the second year in a row, the future looks murky at best for this team. They've got a lot of money committed to the core of this team, so they have limited flexibility to build a true contender around Giannis. Add in some major questions at the coaching position along with Giannis's looming free agency and Supermax decision, and you have one of the most critical offseasons in team history. Welcome back everybody, it's Courtside TV, and today we're going to be talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. The MVP trophy presentation might be a little awkward for Giannis. Calling back vibes of Dirk Nowitzki in 2011, Giannis was eliminated from the playoffs early despite being likely the back-to-back MVP of the league. He turned his ankle, which limited him in Game 3, re-injured it in Game 4, and then missed Game 5. The Heat were a horrible matchup for Milwaukee, shutting Giannis out of the paint and forcing the Bucks role players to make shots, which they just simply couldn't do at a consistent rate. Obviously, it was a great season for Antetokounmpo, but I'm going to be critical of him for just a minute here. He's still young and getting better, but if Giannis wants to take that next step and become a true number one player in the NBA, he's got to work on his jump shot. He's made steady improvements as a shooter over the course of his career, but he's got to figure out how to do it a little bit more consistently and just better overall when it comes to late in games in tight playoff situations where teams are going to pack the paint and force the Bucks to make shots, because that's how you defend this team. You force Giannis and force the rest of the team to make those three-point jumpers and even those mid-range elbow jumpers, whatever, and Giannis just can't do that right now. You know, his style is to get right to the rim, get those strong Euro steps in the lane, go strong to the basket and dunk, and that works really well for most of the game. You know, defenders get tired. It's really hard to stop a guy that's as big and as strong as him, but late in games the defense tightens up and takes that away, and he's just not consistent enough as a mid-range and outside shooter to knock those shots down, and so he has to rely on his teammates to do those things. And right now, the Bucks really don't have that many players on the roster that you can trust in those late game, big time situations. You know, Chris Middleton had a great game in Game 4 to help, stave off elimination and buy them some more time, but it ended up not mattering. They lost the series anyway, and so they don't really have those players that can help Giannis out, and so that would be a priority for the Bucks to find those players that can help him, but also for Giannis himself to develop those skills to be able to close games more efficiently with those shooting skills, improving his free throw efficiency, all that good stuff. Okay, now I'm done criticizing the two-time MVP. He's obviously a great player, but there is still work to be done. Chris Middleton has had an up and down playoff career with some great performances here, but some obvious stinkers there. He had a great regular season, he was obviously a worthy all-star, and he's a good number 2 option next to Giannis. He just signed a massive contract extension, and is he worth that amount of money for the Bucks? Probably not. It really depends on if Giannis remains on the team, because if for whatever reason Giannis requests a trade or leaves in free agency, this Middleton contract looks really bad when you're not really going to have a contender, and he's making $35-40 million for the next 4 seasons. Obviously, he belongs on this team as long as the Bucks are contending, but with Giannis's free agency decision up in the air, this could potentially look like a pretty bad contract in a couple of years. But as long as Antetokounmpo is with the Bucks, I'm sure that Middleton will be as well. And beyond those two, the Bucks roster is really just a lot of role players. You've got guys like Brook Lopez and Eric Bledsoe, who are both making a sizable amount of money and on long-term deals. And they're both good players, they're fine. But there's still some questions about Eric Bledsoe's, offensive consistency in the playoffs. He's struggled at times last year and this season. And the decision to keep him over Malcolm Brogdon last year it's been criticized by a lot of people, and I think rightfully so. Brogdon's a lot younger, his skill set's a little bit different, and he's, shown to be maybe a little bit more of a consistent performer. So that's a decision that I think might come back to bite the Bucks in the near future, with, Giannis's free agency and everything. And then Brook Lopez he's also a good player. He was just named to, the All-NBA defensive team. And he's great on defense. He can shoot 3-pointers well for a big man at his size. And these are both, they're fine players. But if, the Bucks feel like they have to shake it up this offseason, I wouldn't be surprised to see either one of them moved. In my last video, I talked about the Thunder and Chris Paul potentially being available for trade. I'm not going to go too in-depth on it here, but the Bucks would consider trading for Chris Paul, and so one of these two, potentially both, would likely have to be included in a deal for him. And then I could potentially see trades being made just to kind of shake things up. There's other point guards that are out there on the market, guys like Dennis Schroeder and Patty Mills and others, that maybe they're in about the same tier as Eric Bledsoe. We're not sure how much that moves the needle for the Bucks, but maybe it shakes things up. Gives them a little bit of a different roster to try to make things work. Because right now, this team has succeeded in the regular season, but they've kind of hit a wall in the playoffs for 2 years in a row. And so maybe the team decides to shake it up this offseason, even if it's not necessarily for a big fish like Chris Paul, but maybe just bringing in some other role players around Giannis and Chris Middleton. So Bledsoe, Lopez, maybe they're out there in the trade market just to kind of shake things up for the Bucks a little bit. And I'm sure the team is motivated to really impress Giannis with their decision making this offseason. Like I've mentioned, his free agency decision is hanging over the franchise. And so if he goes to ownership and management and says, hey, this roster's not working, I need you guys to make some changes. I need a better point guard. I need somebody else who can help me out on the perimeter a little bit more, whatever Giannis wants. I would expect the Bucks to absolutely listen to that. And so both of these guys, Bledsoe and Lopez, I think are out there on the trade market, maybe just for a piece that the team thinks fits a little bit better, or just to mix it up and try something else, because what they have right now isn't working. And then throw guys like George Hill and Ersan Ilyasova and Robin Lopez also into that conversation. Those are veterans and they're nice players on this team, but they would maybe potentially be moved for the right price to mix things up on the team. And then honestly, the biggest asset they have on this roster, outside of their star players, of course, is probably Dante DiVincenzo. They don't have that many first round picks left, and the ones that they do are, they're projected to be later in the first round. So DiVincenzo is really their one young asset on the roster that other teams would like to have. He's been good. He's played a role for the team this year, and he was playing in crunch time, in closeout games in the playoffs. So obviously he's a good player. The Bucks value him. But if another team, asked for DiVincenzo in a trade, potentially a trade for Chris Paul, that would obviously be something that the Thunder would like to have. And so DiVincenzo, I think, potentially could be moved as really the Bucks' only asset to kind of improve this team without having to trade one of their two stars, because like I said, they don't really have that many draft picks. So DiVincenzo is really the player that they would use to entice other teams to take a deal. So looking at their cap sheet, the Bucks pretty much have all of their core pieces under contract, and that can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. On one hand, of course, they've been a great team in the regular season. They've had the best record in the league 2 years in a row, and they have the likely 2-time MVP. So this team is very good, and they've run into a couple of issues in the playoffs, but you could realistically say, hey, we've gotten unlucky. Maybe if Giannis didn't get hurt, it could have gone a different way, or if we didn't run into the Heat in the second round, they're a bad matchup for us, whatever. You can make excuses like that, and teams do that a lot, right? I think it would be wise for the Bucks to try to shake things up, but maybe we are just looking at them running the same team back next year because they have everybody under contract. Just potentially try to sign a couple more veterans, guys who can shoot a little bit more, help space the floor, guys that fit better around Giannis, and kind of just try to run this back. Again, looking at their free agents here, you got a guy like Kyle Korver. He mentioned that he'll weigh retiring this offseason. Not sure what he's going to do. Either way, he was fine for the Bucks. He actually was. He played a little bit in the postseason despite being 39 years old, 40. And he played and he can shoot, but maybe there'll be another team that would give him a 1-year deal. He's old now, obviously not the player that he once was, and maybe he'll just decide to hang it up and whatever, and that would be fine too. They're not going to be too miffed about that. Pat Connaughton, he played a little bit in the regular season, or he played a lot in the regular season, not as much in the postseason, and so he's not going to be a high priority for them either. Sterling Brown, again, he's a young player. Maybe he's something, but not a huge priority. And Marvin Williams announced his retirement, so he will not be coming back to the team next year. So what I would advise the Bucks to do is find shooting, find floor spacers. Again, every team needs that. So it's easier said than done to get those guys. But I would actually probably consider bringing Kyle Korver back if he does decide to play another year. And then just looking for other guys with a similar skill set. as well as exploring the trade market for options for Bledsoe and Lopez, and even guys like Ilyasova, who is old and doesn't really play much anymore, but is making a decent amount of salary, so that could potentially be used in a trade. Robin Lopez, again, didn't really play much in the playoffs. He's got a player option for around $5 million. Maybe there's a trade out there for him. George Hill's getting older. He was good for them this year, but again, there's always options out there for them. So like I said, the Bucks have a very critical offseason coming up, and another major decision that they will have to make is around their coach, Mike Budenholzer. Now, he has been really great in the regular season for the last 2 years for them, and it's a similar story to what his teams were like in Atlanta, where they had really good regular season records, and then they'd get to the playoffs and coaching would kind of fail to make adjustments, and they'd fail to really figure out what the other team's doing and kind of switch up their personnel and their play style and stuff to win games. And so Budenholzer kind of was a little slow to adjust to the Heat style, which resulted in them going down 3-0, and then of course the Giannis injury basically ended the series. So it was kind of a tough series for Budenholzer. And it's a similar story to last year as well. Against the Raptors, they went up 2-0, and then Toronto adjusted and won 4 games in a row and beat them in 6. So it's pretty interesting to see what they will do with their head coaching position. I'm not sure if it's the right move to fire Budenholzer. He's obviously a great regular season coach, and he's led the team, to even be in this position in the playoffs in the first place. The teams, their fortunes kind of turned around when they replaced Jason Kidd with him, and that's also coupled with the development of Giannis and Chris Middleton and all of that good stuff. But they're going to need a little bit more out of Budenholzer in the playoffs, and maybe that's something he can fix, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a part of who he is. But I'm not sure if firing him is the right move, as I don't know if there's that many coaches out there that are better than him right now. But maybe it comes down to what Giannis wants, right? His free agency, that's a big thing for them. I've said it, 20 times, I'll say it again. This is the biggest, most consequential decision that really, any player in the league will have over the last couple years and for the next couple seasons. This is a seismic decision for Giannis to make, whether he's going to sign that Supermax extension, request a trade, or leave in free agency, whatever. And from what we've seen from him, it's been, he's been consistent that he wants to stay in Milwaukee and he wants to develop a team there. Now, a lot of stars prior to him have said stuff like that. We have past quotes from guys like Kevin Durant and Anthony Davis, and all guys, who have been in a city and said that they've loved it there and stuff, but then eventually when it comes time to make a decision, they have changed their mind and not, stayed consistent with what their message has been to the media. So maybe that's what Giannis is doing, maybe not. Maybe he's more of the Damian Lillard type, where he wants to stay loyal to the city and where he was drafted and try to win a title there. And that would be fine too, but we're not really sure. There's going to be all these headlines coming out of Giannis said this, Giannis said that, Giannis didn't say this, whatever. We can't know until he decides to either sign the Supermax or turn it down, because if he turns it down, that signals that he's probably looking for his way out, and if he signs it, obviously he's there for the next 5 seasons. So that's going to be a very big decision for them, and so I'm sure that the Bucks, a lot of their offseason decisions will be made around, hey, let's keep Giannis happy. So if he wants a different coach, they're going to have a different coach. If he wants to have an upgrade at point guard, they're going to try to upgrade at point guard. If he wants to, trade all their draft picks and young assets for somebody who can come in and maybe be a win now player, that's what they're going to do. So everything revolves around keeping Giannis happy and keeping him in town. And we're not, we won't know what's going to happen until we know. So there's lots of questions for them this offseason, and, only Giannis knows the answer. One thing we do know for sure is there will be no shortage of teams that are interested in Antetokounmpo. Of course, we have a short list of teams like the Heat, the Raptors, the Clippers, the Warriors, and the Mavericks have all already had reported interest. Spoiler alert, every team in the league is interested, okay? He's, a top 3 player, top 5, whatever you want to say, top 1 if you believe that, whatever. He's a very good player, and he's still young and only getting better. And so everybody's going to be interested. Everybody with trade assets will be interested. Everybody with, an open salary spot will be interested. And so there's teams around the league who are loading up to try to gather assets and cap space in order to make a run at Giannis. And so he will have no shortage of suitors if he decides to request a trade or hit free agency, whatever. That's one thing that we know for sure. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Giannis Antetokounmpo's offseason might be one of the biggest decisions in the NBA in the last decade, and I for one am excited to see what he's going to do, whether he signs that Supermax extension or turns it down. It'll be definitely interesting to see what kind of decision he makes and what kind of precedent that sets for future players in the NBA. So that's pretty much it for my thoughts on the Bucks. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time. I'll be back with a new video. So thanks guys all for watching, and I'll see you in a couple days.